Do we or do we not have free will? The age-old question, the wonderful topic of debate. Somebody that I've never really heard referenced within the debate of free will is Einstein. And so I was quite interested when coming across the chapter quite ways through Einstein's biography by Walter Isaacson, a book that you perhaps have seen or come across or maybe even have on your bookshelf. Is a larger book, as Walter Isaacson's biographies tend to be, as Einstein rides a bicycle. So, chapter 17 is called Einstein's God. And this is something that you'll often see. Einstein is maybe like the most quoted and misquoted person in the world. And reading a biography of Einstein, thinking through his life, will give you a lot of insight, as he was the first put on a pedestal, hyper-famous celebrity fixation of a scientist, or even I would say of a public intellectual. And it's quite interesting to think about that in the context of our modern times, and to think about, a century later, who the people are that we put on a pedestal, sell out arenas to go and listen to speak, and they come on tour to go and fill up the streets and parade down the streets in honor of them. I don't know if there's really actually been a person who's encapsulated that as much as Einstein has. And for many different reasons, so much that we cannot cover in a short video, so much that there have been tomes and books published to try to dive into and to understand more of. For this, I want to just go into something that, again, I don't think has really been explored much, at least within the YouTube or podcast sphere, and that is Einstein on free will, and the fact that Einstein did not believe in free will. There was a interesting part here where Einstein had an interview with somebody named George Sylvester Viereck, and he was later jailed in America for being a Nazi sympathizer, a propagandist. And he wrote a book called Glimpses of the Great, which you can find for free online, where he interviewed people from Freud to Hitler, and Einstein in there as well, which is just interesting to imagine that first and foremost. Nowadays within podcasting and that sort of thing, interviewing somebody is a very different sort of thing. When you were an interviewer back then, this would now be the 1930s, Einstein being an older man at this point, 50 years old. It's just interesting to think about, my little setup here to interview someone here is a lot different than being a journalist back then and sitting down with someone, doing an interview, writing down their answers, or having somebody type it out, or eventually having voice recordings to then transcribe. Nowadays, my phone will transcribe my voice into text for me, and I can interview Einstein through an AI generation of him. So it's very different. But anyways, it's an interesting book that you can read, or at least read through these interviews. Now, in this we can read through here, they begin the discussion on something that was really in vogue at this time. Before, when Einstein was first becoming the public figure as he was, people would always try to get him to give a one-sentence explanation of relativity, and people were enthusiastic about understanding relativity, but always in layman's terms, which Einstein would either give quirky responses for, or rather philosophical ones, because of course things as complex as these cannot be answered so simplistically. And now at this point in his life, and in the mass interest or hysteria about Einstein, it was asking him if he believed in God. So on one question, you accept the historical existence of Jesus? Unquestionably, he says. No one can read the Gospels without feeling the actual presence of Jesus. His personality pulsates in every word. No myth is filled with such life. No myth is filled with such life. I don't know how I felt initially reading this. I don't necessarily disagree how a myth could not be filled with such life as the Gospels are. Leaving that aside, do you believe in God? Well, I am not an atheist. The problem involved is too vast for our limited minds. We are in the position of a little child entering a huge library filled with books in many languages. This child knows someone must have written these books, someone or something, but it does not know how or even why. It would not understand the languages in which they are written. The child dimly suspects a mysterious order in the arrangement of the books, but doesn't know what it is. That, it seems to me, says Einstein, is the attitude of even the most intelligent human beings toward God. We see the universe marvelously arranged and obeying certain laws, but only dimly understand these laws. So is that a Jewish conception of God? Einstein says, I am a determinist. I do not believe in free will. Jews believe in free will. They believe that man shapes his own life. I reject that doctrine. In that respect, I am not a Jew. Is this Spinoza's God? I'm fascinated by Spinoza's pantheism, but I admire even more his contribution to modern thought because he is the first philosopher to deal with the soul and the body as one and not two separate things. How did Einstein get his ideas? To which he says, I'm enough of an artist to draw freely on my imagination. Think about his thought experiments, right? Einstein being a theoretical physicist, not an experimental physicist, and his thought experiments, right? So early in his career, Einstein in the patent office, when he had his breakthrough special relativity, theory of relativity, etc., etc., E equals mc squared, all the stuff that we know about Einstein in an oversimplistic way. All of this was, oh, there's a great picture somewhere here. Einstein in the patent office. I'm not going to get into this, but you should all be aware of, right? His thought experiment, person on a train, right? Time being relative to the person on the train or to the observer outside of the train. Here's the Bern clock tower, which he would pass every day on his way to work. His job at the patent office, not exactly involving physics, but allowing his mind to wander and to come up with thought experiments, right? So when Einstein later on here, many decades after his revolutionary and productive period as an early theoretical physicist, says that he draws freely on his imagination and that imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. And I think of Ralph Waldo Emerson's Circular Philosopher. And now here's one for the longevity field in biohacking and such other topics which I'm interested in. Do you believe in immortality? No, Einstein says, and one life is enough for me. Okay, we'll get back to the concept of free will, but in terms of aging and whatnot, so here's some photographs. This is Einstein in 1940. That's kind of the image of him that we all know. Then at some point, he radically aged, and then Einstein's nose totally got large. His face changed. This is only 10 years later. So when talking about one lifestyle, one life is enough for him. It's interesting, right? Because I think Einstein is something that we all admire and learn from. He just totally aged within a decade or so. And yeah, aging is something that happens. It's not much of a mystery here. Here's Einstein with his wife, his first cousin. Hey. But when I see something like this, do you believe in immortality? Fair enough for him to say no, but in the modern context, I at least, when interviewing a well-loved and famous scientist of today's world, I would ask them, do you believe in longevity? And if so, would you be willing to try to extend your lifespan as long as possible because we mere mortals depend on your intellectualism to help us? And so long as you can put off aging and death for at least even an extra decade of your life, it is worthwhile. But do we have any control over that? Well, that's the question of free will. So this segment here, once again, is exploring more of his beliefs in God, what God meant to him. And because he was pressed on this so much, he published something called What I Believe. It was a credo, manifesto, maybe you could say, in which he says, quoting an explanation of what he meant when he called himself religious. The most beautiful emotion we can experience is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion that stands at the cradle of all true art and science. Art and science, okay? This is making me think about Nietzsche. All right. Also, Alexander von Humboldt. Like there's this long lineage of thinkers that didn't so much distinguish between art being something over here and science being something over there. But bringing those together is also a similar idea of bringing body and soul together, thinking of these things as one thing. I think there's something to that. He whom this emotion is a stranger, so someone who can no longer wonder or stand wrapped in awe, have reverence, is as good as dead, a snuffed out candle. Einstein, ever the poet. To sense that behind anything, so behind anything that we can experience, there is something that our minds cannot grasp, whose beauty and sublimity, okay, the sublime, reaches us only indirectly. This is religiousness. In this sense, and in this sense only, I am a devoutly religious man. So to hear these words from a scientist, not only a scientist, but a scientist which we in our society put on a pedestal as the scientist, right? Einstein exists as an archetype for us. Not so much exactly as the scientist, I would say. That would more be like, I think, someone in a lab coat, right? Someone who's prim and proper would be kind of the archetypal scientist that we have. Einstein is more like the quintessential image of the crazy genius in our society. His uncombed hair, his bohemian appearance, having a quote and an idea for every topic that you could throw at him, a sort of polymath. To hear these views expressed by someone that we put on a pedestal and we quote all the time, we wear a t-shirt with his face, we find his quotes on social media. I think it's very fascinating that these were the beliefs and the views of that person, which we hold with such esteem, which I would say we actually really know very little about, and we misquote and misrepresent him all the time. But that's sort of an idea, I think, to summarize, which is worthy in and of itself to think about, is I don't think can be proved right or wrong, and I personally think has a lot of merit to it. Right? It's like the idea that scientists will dismiss something like Christianity and the miracle of Jesus' resurrection. I would be more inclined to be within that camp to say, I don't believe that to be possible. I think that that is a myth and a story that is used, actually intended to represent something about life, not so much to be taken as a matter of fact. However, with that said, the Big Bang is that same sort of thing, but in a scientific story, one that we do look at as a matter of fact. So what happened before the Big Bang and why the Big Bang happened is a miracle that we all just need to accept, to then accept all of our scientific understanding of the cosmos that comes thereafter. So no matter where you sit on this idea of what is life and where do we come from, whether a religious view or a scientific view, you have to always, at some point, at the depths of it, just wave your hands and say, okay, I don't know what happens there. Let's just call it a miracle. And that is the awe and reverence that you must have for life, that Einstein is saying makes you religious, accepting that to be true. And then he goes on to explain here he believes in that version of a God, not in a God that would meddle or even care about the goings-ons of humans. That seems a little bit like very human focused, but also oversimplistic, especially in light of the mysteries of the cosmos and the grandeur of it all. Now, back to free will. We can go on to outline here that scientists aim to uncover the immutable laws that govern reality, and in doing so, they must reject the notion that divine will, or for that matter, human will, plays a role that would violate this cosmic causality. This is Einstein's belief in causal determinism, which is inherent in his scientific outlook, conflicted not only with the concept of a personal God, it was also, in Einstein's mind, incompatible with human free will. So he was a deeply moral man, but his belief in determinism made it difficult for him to accept the idea of moral choice and individual responsibilities is the heart of most ethical systems. Goes on to say, certain theologians have generally believed that people have this free will and are responsible for their actions. They are free to choose, as what happens in the Bible, to defy God's commands, despite the fact that this seems to conflict with the belief that God is all-knowing and all-powerful. So there's highlighting a sort of paradox in religious thinking. Einstein, on the other hand, believed, as Spinoza did, that a person's actions were just as determined as that of a billiard ball or a planet or a star. God damn. So human beings in their thinking, feeling, and acting are not free, but are as causally bound as the stars and their motions. So what the hell do we do with that? So human actions are determined beyond their control by both physical and psychological laws, is what Einstein believed, a concept he drew also from his reading of Schopenhauer, to whom he attributed in his Credo What I Believe, a maxim along these lines. This is Einstein speaking now. I do not believe at all in free will in the philosophical sense. Everybody acts not only under external compulsion, but also in accordance with inner necessity. So external compulsion, I think what he's getting at there is the external forces around us, right? The nature, the ecology that we exist in, and inner necessity. So inner physiological forces, okay? Sure. To quote Schopenhauer now, a man can do as he wills, but not will as he wills. Meaning, we can do as we will, but we cannot choose what we will. On some level, there is a space there where we can choose, but within that space, we do not choose what we're able to choose. Fundamentally, we are constrained by being humans. I think that is the actual simplistic notion of this idea, and this topic of whether or not we have free will gets so abstracted. I think the fundamental reality that most of us can agree on, and my interpretation of reading Einstein's view on this, is that we have free will only to a degree. None of us could argue against the idea that we are bound within the physical laws of being human, the laws of the cosmos, and the laws of our nature here on Earth. And as I mention Earth, I think outside we can use the nature outside of my window to illustrate this. There are people walking around in the park, playing on the playground, and I'm in here making a video talking about a book that I've been reading after drinking coffee and feeling my brain quite stimulated. All of these activities are bound by a certain constraint, okay? Within that, I believe that we, myself and those children on the swing out there, have the ability to choose what to do, choose to make a video. But I was inspired to make this as I was reading this. I thought, oh my God, this is a perfect topic. I'm going to make a video on this. But then how I make the video, the fact that I'm using this camera, this tripod, this microphone, wearing this toque, reading this book, using these highlighters, drinking this coffee, those are all kinds of constraints, right? I don't have the ability to just choose to create the reality around me and the things that I use and the opportunities that I have to do. These children there are not swinging anymore, so they seemingly made the choice to not swing, but rather to go on the teeter-totter. But they do not have the ability to choose much else between a swing and a teeter-totter, because those are constraints that the physical laws of nature have created a playground around. So we have limitations in what we're able to choose because there are limitations with our physical reality. So do you believe Einstein was once asked that humans are free agents? No, I am determinist. Everything is determined, the beginning as well as the end, by forces which we have no control. It is determined for the insect as well as for the star. Human beings, vegetables, or cosmic dust. We all dance to a mysterious tune. intoned in the distance by an invisible player. This attitude appalled some of his friends, such as Max Born, who thought it completely undermined the foundations of human morality. Max Born said, "I cannot understand how you can combine an entirely mechanistic universe with the freedom of the ethical individual. To me, a deterministic world is quite abhorrent, but maybe you're right. And the world is that way, as you say, but at this moment it does not really look like it in physics, or even less so in the rest of the world. And interjecting here is quantum uncertainty and spooky action at a distance, which Einstein was sort of appalled by. So quantum mechanics and the seeming uncertainty that this particle might be here or might be there, and there's no way of determining it. So when you get down to the quantum level, there is no rhyme or reason. And Einstein saying that I am unable to believe in a dice-playing God, that there could be uncertainty underlying the foundations of our reality. And here we are, still today in 2025, in this sort of mysterious realm where we don't know for sure about the uncertainty principles of quantum mechanics. We don't know how to reconcile these things together, and so therefore we can't really come up with any better answers to whether or not life is deterministic. I mean, these things are all somehow connected. Let's just peruse the rest of this page and finish it off there. Okay, so he says free will is something that is useful and necessary for a civilized society. The idea of free will, because it causes people to take responsibility for their own actions. Acting as if people were responsible for their actions would psychologically and practically prompt them to act in a more responsible manner. So he says acting as though we have free will encourages us to be more responsible. But if you're acting as though you have free will, do you not have the ability to choose to act as if you have free will? And this is where it becomes a circular argument where I don't think this gives any more deeper insight into the kind of nonsensical absurdity of the debate about free will. He also says something that says, I know that philosophically a murderer is not responsible for his crime, but I prefer to not take tea with him. So I don't know. I think we'll just stop it right there because I personally think the free will debate gets redundant and ridiculous. I think a lot of what Einstein is getting at here, both on the conceptualization of God and the conceptualization of free will, are valid and interesting, but not anything final on the topic. And there we have it. Einstein is just a man like you and me, and he's just a human being, flawed and trying to understand the mysteries of reality, but coming around in circular arguments. I think what holds, in summary, is that we have some degree of freedom to choose our actions and our activities, to act responsibly. I'm choosing to make this video, but I am inspired by something that is mysterious and outside of me that I can't quite grasp. Insofar as I'm able to choose what I do, I am restricted within the bounds of physics. I am restricted within the bounds of the nature of reality which we find ourselves in. So in that degree, we only have so much free will. But in the degree that I have the ability to choose whether or not to make the video, choose whether or not to go on the playground, on the swing or the teeter-totter, there is a real ability to choose there. Einstein, in talking about these things, is actively choosing the words that he's going to say, choosing the ideas that he wants to expound upon. So there is some level of free choice, but we are constrained within the bounds of reality.